Speaking of jerks, okay, and what Worldcon just happened. Okay, that was this 2 weekends ago, I think, past weekend, and George R. R. Martin was in attendance along with Brandon Sanderson and Matt Dinneman, and there was a panel where people got to ask them questions, and this fan got up there and asked the weirdest question. It was just so antisocial. Asked George R. R. Martin, "You're getting old and you're gonna die soon. When are you going to hand off the completion of the Game of Thrones series to another author?" And Brandon Sanderson sitting right next to him, who finished Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. So Brandon Sanderson says, "Look, I'm not doing it. No, not me." Okay.
It really shouldn't be him. He would do a terrible job.
Oh yeah, it would be awful. Okay, because it's totally different outlooks and everything like that. But what happened was George got up and left, and he went to go sign books, and they just ended the panel because it was so just not good. It was so awkward, and no one could get over it. But it does bring out a legitimate question, right? Okay, and I'm a jerk. Okay, so I'm just gonna treat things. What level of responsibility do authors have to their fans to complete their series? If at a certain point fans have invested so much time, money, I mean, you've got to show identity, okay, cosplaying, okay, tattoos. You've invested so much in this series, and the author just isn't finishing it. At what point should the author be called out like this? Okay, because this is, while we can make fun of this fan, on the other hand, most of the fans feel this way. Like this is a symptom. It's not like a isolated incident. It's only isolated because George R. R. Martin is rarely at events where people can ask him questions.
Rarity is going up, I will say.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I'm not going to want to go to more things.
Here, that's my. First of all, as a human being, no one should treat another human being like that, right? But George R. R. Martin doesn't count as just a human being anymore, because of the cultural impact that he's had. And I am of the opinion, and people can argue with me about this wrongly, that at a certain point, when you have a certain threshold of cultural impact, you actually do have a responsibility to behave well for your audience. Like Roy Rogers, for instance, when he was an actor, he actually made sure his personal life was good for his audience, which were boys. They were boys who wanted to be like Roy Rogers. And I am of the opinion there's a responsibility that comes along with having that kind of impact.
Seem we should be good examples and role models for impressionable young people. I don't think George R. R. Martin sees himself as a role model for impressionable young people. So this,
but is he like George Lucas had the same issue, right? Well, not the exact same problem, but the same issue, to where people didn't like the prequels, because they took the previously created material that he licensed and made money off of and tossed it out.
No, not for the prequels.
No. Don't argue with me on this. I know my stuff. Okay. So like Boba Fett's history was totally different in the extended universe. Then the prequels came out and he tossed it out. And there was a lot of upset over that. And then the sequels came out and everyone liked the prequels way more at that point.
The prequels are horrendously underrated in my opinion. But there's another angle here that I think is important to talk about. Many years ago, I visited Austria with my wife, and we went to Salzburg, which is where Sound of Music is filmed. And we visited the graveyard in Salzburg that inspired the graveyard that they filmed, where the Nazis are searching for the family and they're like hiding behind the gravestones at the end of Sound of Music. Mm-hmm. Turns out that they didn't film in the actual graveyard because they couldn't get permission to like set up camera equipment on top of people's dead bodies. So like, okay, that makes sense.
Feels disrespectful.
Yeah. So the actual one is like on the side of a hill. It's very hilly. The one in the film is very flat. It's in a soundstage, but they actually copied it pretty closely. So as we're walking around this graveyard, I was struck by how many skeletons there were on tombstones and in statues, and like skeletons with their fingers pointing right at you, because this is a medieval graveyard. And often underneath the skeleton would be a Latin phrase, and it was memento mori. Remember that you are mortal. And I've thought about that ever since, because our ancestors had this desire to be reminded of their mortality to encourage them to live a more virtuous life.
Right.
And the modern view, or the current day view, really rejects that, right? If you're around an old person, you don't mention that they're going to die soon. That's offensive. Whereas their ancestors would have seen that as very important, actually. If you're old, you need to be reminded that you're going to die soon. And if you're young, you need to be reminded that you're going to die soon. And so I actually disagree that the problem with this was him telling George R.R. Martin that he's going to die soon, because that actually could have been like an act of grace, like a kindness to somebody who's been in denial. He's like, I'm going to live forever. It's like, no, you're not.
Now, if you hold up a billboard with a clock on it that's like tick, 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 going down.
It's the ultimate statistic that 10 out of 10 people die. And lying to ourselves about this statistic doesn't do us any favors, and it doesn't do our readers any favors. And so having a plan, one, living a virtuous life, and thinking in terms of eternity and giving an answer on the day of judgment for the deeds done in the body, whether they be good or evil. It's good strategy. Highly recommend. But also thinking in terms of your legacy and your readership, right? If you leave a series incomplete, then that series' longevity is dramatically diminished. Future generations aren't going to be nearly as interested in an incomplete series as the first generation was in a series they thought would become complete. And so having a succession plan, like having an outline, having a successor, right? Like a fellow author, and you have, in writing that they have the rights to finish your story, and they have an outline so that if you die, they can make an effort at it, or, explaining to your spouse. Like, I think that, the Wheel of Time books were really saved by Brandon Sanderson. Yep. One, I think he was a better writer, and so it gave them a really solid ending. But also, it ended, right? That series is too long to just stop.
Yeah.
That series would have died.
Again, you're looking at investment, right?
Yeah.
And people, if it's not ever going to end, people aren't going to invest in it, or they're going to be angry. And that anger transfers all the way around. There are people not starting my fantasy series because George R.R. Martin hasn't finished his, because Patrick Rothfuss hasn't finished his.
Yeah.
And they're just been burned. They're like, I'm not starting it with anyone then. It's like, I didn't do that. Like, that's not me. I'm just in the middle of writing. And it doesn't matter.
And also think of your heirs. So say what you will about the Wheel of Times TV show. And I have many things I could say, but none of it is positive. But I will say this as a positive thing. Harriet, which was his wife, I'm blanking on the name of the guy who wrote the Wheel of Time books.
Robert Jordan.
Robert Jordan's wife, Harriet, has been comforted in her widowhood by the Amazon money and by the Brandon Sanderson money.
Yes.
Right? Like, Robert Jordan left his wife in a comfortable way because he had a plan for the ending of the series. And because Harriet felt that she had permission to hand it off, because she had been very involved in the writing of the books. I think she was an editor for some of them. He had an assistant as well. And that was really solid, because otherwise sales would have cratered because there was no completion of the books. And he probably made him enough money, and he probably invested it well where she would have been comfortable either way, but maybe not, right? We don't know people's financial
But this is just good behavior, right? You're thinking of your family, you're thinking of your legacy, your children. And there's actually a toxic thing right now, which is, I'm not leaving my children anything. They can make their own way in the world. And that's just wrong. I mean, you want to give your children every advantage that they can have, because the world's hard. The world sucks. And the world's trying everything it can to take what you had away. So there's no reason to just let your kids get beat down. So just having this forward-looking and unafraid of death. Okay, you should be handling that on your own. I have recommendations if you want to DM me. You should be unafraid of death and planning for your legacy beyond it, for your heritage, for those that are going to come after you. And honestly, this is something that I think George R.R. Martin has failed at. And, I don't have the kind of relationship with him where I would say that to his face. Okay, but if he asks me, let's say he's watching this show for some reason, if he wants to come after me about it, sure. You know, I'll be like, look, hey, you've done an incredible thing by writing a series that has just, you know, upended American culture for a while. I mean, Game of Thrones is huge. And yeah, good on you for that. I mean, you did incredible world building and stuff. I got some issues with morality and in particular descriptions of women, but you know, you've had an effect, you've had an impact, and you're really falling down on the fact that you're not finishing it. And I understand it's a huge deal. When you've had that kind of impact, how do you wrap it up? Like, how do you resolve it?
I would, if I were George R. R. Martin and we're experiencing the kind of fear that he's feeling, there is a way to preserve your legacy while still avoiding the inevitable blowback, because his worldview ends in nihilism, which is not going to leave people happy at the end of his story. It's part of the reason why he doesn't want to finish his stories, is that his worldview is very bankrupt, morally, but also ideologically. But he could still finish and write the last book and say, it's in my will, you know, 10 days after I die, my publishers have the right. That way he can still like fulfill his promise to his readers without having to hear all of the pushback.
And that book would sell so many copies, you know, but it won't release until I die. But then people are going to shoot him. So that, I mean, that's not as good.
Yeah, I don't think he has any children. People without children tend to not have as like view of terms of like future generations. They don't think of themselves as a potential ancestor.
Right.
And, you know, there's a selfishness that's particular in his generation, where baby boomers got all of these blessings from the generations above them, but they don't want to have kids or share those blessings with the generations below them. It's not universal to baby boomers, but it's particularly acute with baby boomers, which is very interesting now that we've offended half of our audience and gone over time.
We're winning.
If you want to have grandchildren, I will give you a pro tip, and that is sell your house, move into a smaller house, and help your children buy a house. Amazingly effective at encouraging the generation of grandchildren.
Holyoke, don't you do it, man. Don't you do it. You're doing it. No.
People are playing bingo and they needed a final square. I'll give it to you. Zeitgeist.